The number 1 and number 2 teams in all of college basketball square off.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into this special crossover edition between Locked On Auburn and Locked On Coogs. That is Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Coogs. I am Zac Blackerby, host of Locked On Auburn. And in case you didn't know, the number 1 team in all of college basketball, according to KenPom, the Houston Cougars, taking on in a neutral site game, heavy air quotes, taking on Bruce Pearl's Auburn Tigers in Houston, Parker, in the opening weekend of college basketball. Give it to me. Let's go.
I mean, what else could you add? 1 versus 2 opening weekend. I know KenPom is the analytical reading on that, but like he's right a lot of the time, Zach. Like this is the top 2 teams in college basketball in the first week of the season. Like what else do you want?
Yeah, this is all I want. And both of these teams kind of coming off of similar situations, like blowing out their first opponent of the season. I will say Auburn's opponent was better than Houston's opponent. I will say that. And the scores were kind of similar, but does that matter? I don't know. But no, this is a cool rematch of it was a second round NCAA tournament game from a few years ago, which Houston held on. If I remember correct, like y'all had a sizable lead at halftime, and then we almost clawed back, and then y'all kind of like had a push in like the last few minutes, I think, if I remember that correctly.
Yeah, a kid named Tremont Mark that's now at Texas kind of led the way down the stretch in that one. Fun game. As much as I want to talk about Houston's changing roster, Auburn has a whole bunch of new guys that are really good at basketball, Zach.
Really good.
There are a lot of new guys.
Yeah, no, Bruce Pearl was very busy this offseason for sure, getting some guys to enter the portal. And then all of a sudden you bring Johni Broome back, which I think is kind of the focal point of what this roster is. And you keep Denver Jones and you kind of expand his role a little bit, one of the guards. But you had to go out and get Miles Kelly from Georgia Tech, JP Pegues from Furman, and just a collection of guys that have been really, really strong all offseason. And the question always is in this transfer portal era of like, okay, these guys, like they're talented and they're able to do it at their previous stops, but it's a new setting. It's a new role. It's a new scheme. How long is that going to take to kind of gel? And I mean, I think they kind of exceeded expectations in their blowout win over Vermont a few days ago.
I got to be honest, when I saw that was the game before us, I don't mean it obviously didn't happen. I thought it almost would function like a trap game because Vermont does sneak up on people all the time. It happens every March Madness. There's some small major, mid-major, and Vermont's frequently one of them. I kind of thought with Bruce Pearl looking towards the weekend, they might sneak up and we might be playing an 0-1 Auburn. Instead, you won by 50. I was really impressed and trying to get ready for what Houston's going to look at this weekend.
That's exactly what I was saying going into it, Parker. It's like Auburn's non-conference schedule is loaded. It's the loadest in program history with Houston. They're going to Duke. They play Purdue and Birmingham coming up. They play Ohio State and Atlanta. They're playing in Maui. They play Iowa State. They could play UConn. It's loaded. It's absolutely loaded. It would have been very easy to overlook Vermont. I mean, find Vermont on a map. I don't think most Americans could.
It's supposed to have nice leaves, though. That's got to cover something, right?
Oh, I heard it's beautiful this time of year. That's what they always say. What is beautiful, you mentioned Johni Broome is like the lone guy back. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the new guys. Johni Broome was kind of like the focal point 2 years ago. And if you asked me 2 years ago, Zach, I didn't know he'd be back 2 years later. I thought he'd be making a lot more money somewhere, playing 82 games a year right now. What's Johni Broome doing? Yeah, well, he is making a lot more money. I can promise you that. Promise you he is very well taken care of. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of drama with that last year for sure. I mean, this is a guy who essentially carried, and carried might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but he was definitely the key piece in Auburn winning the SEC tournament championship a year ago. I think he was the SEC tournament player of the year or something like that. I mean, he won all sorts of accolades. And there were programs that came after him, supposedly, to try to get him into the portal. And Auburn held on to him. And there was also some talk of would he go to the NBA? And the fact of the matter is, like, there are questions and concerns. Does his game translate to the next level? And you're going to see him more at the 4 this year. We saw that a little bit in the season opener against Vermont. Dylan Cardwell, another guy who's played a lot of college basketball for Auburn, being kind of the center. And so I think they're going to kind of like say, hey, Johni, you could do more things to kind of put that on tape to see if the NBA will want you a little bit more if that's the case. But Johni has added so much to his game since, a few years ago when these two teams met. I think he's better off ball. I think he's better from the wing. I think he's a better defender. And I think he is better around the rim too. Johni Broome is a complete basketball player.
So I was wondering the other day after watching the Vermont game, obviously I was very impressed. Do you think he's like an SEC player of the year, national player of the year kind of candidate? How realistic is that hype?
I think it's very real. I think he was in contention for it a year ago, and you got to think he's going to take somewhat of a step from last year to this year, especially if, I think it's easier to accumulate stats in some positions over others. And as the 4, like, he should be able to get his points, should be able to get his rebounds, should be able to get maybe a few more assists in these highlight plays. And I think so. I think he's certainly in that. There were some lists that had him as the best player in college basketball during the season, as far as like the analytics, and his efficiency numbers from last year were insane. So I think he's totally a contender for it.
He has expanded his game some. Bruce Pearl's running more of a 5-out look against Vermont, and frankly led to like a bajillion threes, it felt like at one point. Were you expecting
Miles
that?
made 7.
Miles
Kelly took 9 shots from 3 and made 7 of them. Are you kidding me? You're obviously not sustainable, but holy cow.
Well, and even though, even coming down to earth from 7 out of 9 is pretty strong, right? Coming down to earth be still 4, 5. That's still really impressive.
Right, you take it, sure.
But as someone who knows a lot more about these guys, I didn't know that was the scheme going into Auburn. Did you know this was going to be a 5-out, let it rain kind of team, or what did you know about these guys?
Yeah, and I think they can do a lot of different things is kind of what's so scary about the potential upside for this, because they have the bodies to beat you up inside too, with Johni Broome and Dylan Cardwell. Cheney Johnson, he played last year at Auburn as a transfer, and people are saying like, okay, we kind of need a little bit more from him. And Cheney Johnson, a quiet 12 points. If Cheney Johnson scores 12 points tonight, it's going to be really hard to beat Auburn. It's going to be really, really hard to beat Auburn. And so that's what we saw against Vermont in limited minutes for a lot of these guys, because they didn't play as much down the stretch there when they were up by like 40 or 50 points. So, I think there's going to be games where they let it rain from 3, and I think there's going to be times where they want to bang bodies below the rim. And I think they can do both.
Well, they can do both, and they've got a bunch of teams that are going to test them in a lot of ways. Zach, it looks like to me a lot of teams have Houston circled with a big bullseye on their schedule. I don't mean that to pat myself on the back. I just get to sit here and talk about them. It's a great program, but Auburn's got such a tough schedule that I could almost say like this almost just feels like you could argue it's another game. They get the UConn, the Purdue's, all those guys that are also in the top 5, 6, 7, 8. Is there any chance that this is just another game for Auburn? The schedule's that tough.
No, I don't think so. Bruce Pearl is so good at getting his team up for the moment, whatever that moment is. He clearly did it against Vermont a few days ago. I think I don't think this is another game. I think this is a big one. I think this is a big one for the Tigers, and I think this team feels like they're underranked going into the season. I still think they're being overlooked. No, I don't think this is another game. And he's going to treat this, Bruce Pearl, I think, to his team, is going to treat this as, look, this is a neutral site game, but come on. Like, everybody in that arena is going to be pulling against you. There's going to be a whole lot of red in that arena. And there should be. There should be. That's the benefit of this game for Houston. So, yeah, to me, like, no, this isn't just another game. What about you guys? Houston's a team that's used to playing in big non-con matchups. You guys always have a number next to your name. This is still relatively new for us in the world of basketball. Where does this rank for you guys as far as where it is on your schedule?
So Kelvin's got a weird knack for finding teams that will be good down the line and booking him out of, appropriate amount of time ahead of the game where he knows what's coming, it feels like. I didn't know Auburn was going to be this good when they scheduled this game, though. And they have like kind of a bookend game in the Fertitta in the Toyota Center with Rice is playing before us. And so there might be a few other colored T-shirts in the stands. But by and large, I think you're right that this is a big-time matchup for Houston folks to get to go watch Cougs in the Toyota Center. I feel like, truthfully, it's kind of switched spots with a few. Like, it's funny, Auburn, and not to bring up Alabama, but they've kind of almost switched spots where, like, 3 or 4 years ago, they might have been a little bit further down the totem pole in non-conference games for Houston. And then this year, they're kind of moved up where some of the other, the Aggies and stuff like that have moved down. And so I wonder if Kelvin's like looking at this as kind of his first showcase of the year. He's really trying to show a lot of people that this is a team that can play without Jamal Shead, right? And so that's a big step for this program, is be very well covered across the country. And this is a chance to do that. And I don't think Kelvin turns those down very often.
Yeah. So Houston plays Auburn and Alabama this year?
They play Alabama in the NIL Players Classic thing in Las Vegas. And it's a right before Thanksgiving. It's that week of like all the weird like showcasey kind of things.
Gotcha.
And frankly, you're both very good, Zach. And I thought you're both. I thought that was football country. I didn't know what we're getting into.
Well, yeah, Alabama's still good at football at least. But yeah, I mean, this is Alabama and Auburn were both. Those are the two best odds according to our friends at FanDuel to win the SEC. It's Alabama and Auburn, which is just kind of crazy. Hey, speaking of Kelvin Sampson, I want to ask you something, and this might be me being a little too petty. I might be being petty, but I want to jump into that in just a moment if you don't mind. That's next on this crossover edition of Locked On Coogs and Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Parker, can you imagine hiring somebody and not using LinkedIn Jobs?
What would you even do? Where you're missing out on 70% of the people. People use LinkedIn. They're not even looking for jobs. Like, what are you looking at?
You give me a few adjectives of somebody that you might hire not through LinkedIn.
Not through LinkedIn.
Not through LinkedIn.
Apparently, they're not very resourceful. They're not using all the things at their tools.
Lazy.
I would argue they don't know how to use the internet. This is not a good candidate very quickly.
All right, maybe somebody who does use LinkedIn Jobs.
Oh, very resourceful, clearly intelligent, understands how to connect to people, and frankly understands how to find people, where to find people at all the same place.
100%. 100%. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This is a crossover edition of Locked On Auburn, Locked On Coogs. Kelvin Sampson, Houston's head coach. Very good head coach. Tell me if I'm petty for this.
Can I just go and say preemptively the answer is probably yes? Anyway, go for it.
Probably. I love that Kelvin Sampson, I don't want to say he threw a fit, but he was not happy that he had to play Auburn in Birmingham in the second round of the NCAA tournament a few years ago. And then Bruce Pearl's like, you know what? We'll play a neutral site game with you, Kelvin, in Houston, the same city that your school is named after, but we'll call it a neutral site game for you. Do you think there's any pettiness involved there, or am I overthinking this?
I guess we'll find out in the post-game presser. Someone will say something, I'm sure. Kelvin was upset about that 2 years ago, though. You're right to bring that up. He thought it was a little ridiculous so Houston got the number one seed. For the folks that don't remember, right. Houston got the number one seed. They're playing in Birmingham, and the 8-9 matchup features Auburn. Actually, I don't remember if it was 8 or the 9. But either way, that means that the number one seed is essentially playing a road game in the second game out the gate. And Kelvin had some choice words about that once upon a time. And I remember on this podcast kind of arguing that he was right. Being really honest. I think part of that, I guess the selection committee is a little bit different than two coaches agreeing to it. But I do appreciate Bruce Pearl being like, fine, we'll return the favor. I think there's something to be admired about that. I think that's impressive. Toyota Center is a fun place to play.
How far is the Toyota Center from Houston's campus, if you had to guess?
I want to say it's like 5 miles.
Yeah. Birmingham is farther than 5 miles away from Auburn. It's like a 2-hour drive. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, 5 miles in the wrong hour of traffic could be a long time. But that's.
Can I tell you a story about the Auburn Houston game a few years ago?
So you had just had a kid, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
Because we had
memory.
because we had a crossover planned initially. That's most of what I remember. That is we had a crossover plan initially, and then you were like very quickly texted like, "Hey, on the way hospital, can't do it. Bye." I was like, "Oh, okay."
I don't remember that. That's so funny. Yeah. So I got Daryl and then two of the guys that co-host with me a lot, Lindsay and Daryl. They stepped up and did the post game thing, and I was so frustrated we lost, and I'm like, honey, I'm going home, and like left my wife in the hospital room with our newborn, and I had to take the oldest one to bed anyway. And I hopped on the live, and my whole live chat is like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I don't know. I'll always remember that. I'll always remember that game because of that, which is funny.
So what you're saying is you're seeking vengeance here. Sorry, I didn't get you, but you're seeking vengeance here. You're still upset about that 2 years later.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm upset, but I do remember that moment. I mean, Houston was the better team. Houston was the better team in that game for sure, and they beat us almost at home. To Kelvin Sampson's credit. So. You mentioned Johni Broome, and you've mentioned, Auburn's ability to shoot the three. How do you expect Houston to match up? What's the mismatch you think that could favor Houston in this game?
So Houston is interesting, and they bring back. So both these teams have a lot of upperclassmen. Houston's upperclassmen have been at Houston for at least a year. They've bring back 4 starters, bring back 7 of their 8-man rotation from last year. They added a couple top 60 recruits, and they added the starting point guard to replace Jamal Shed as Milos Uzan from Oklahoma. He was a starter there for 2 years. So they feel pretty strong about the veteran league. Like there shouldn't be a situation these guys haven't played in before on the floor. And so, they've played, and they haven't played anyone that shot 7 of 9 from 3, but they played some teams that shoot the ball well and know how to run them off the line and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With all that depth, because they returned so many guys, I would think you'll probably see a lot more rotations and fresh legs and trying to run people at the gym with that kind of stuff. Not that Houston plays incredibly fast pace or anything, but I think that you'll see that be more of the scheme play here. But ultimately, I think the truth is you're thinking, you've just got guys that have played together for so long at this point. Juwan Roberts is a 6th-year senior. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even the guys that played on Auburn's team last year that are coming back, their roles are kind of different. I mean, we mentioned Johni Broome playing more of the 4. He didn't do that a ton last year. Dylan Cardwell kind of playing more minutes at the 5. He played minutes there, but not really in a pseudo starting role type thing. And then Denver Jones, he's playing more of the 1. He pretty much played exclusively 2. I think he played a little 1, if I remember correctly. He's kind of been asked to do a little bit more of that, at least in the preseason practices. We'll see how much he does that because they're getting some out of their freshman, Tahad Pettiford. He looks really good. He went 0 for 4 from the floor, but his ability to create his own shot, you can see the traits that are there. But
he's the McDonald's All-American. He's number 0 or something like that, the little guy.
Number 0 on the court, but number 1 in our hearts.
Correct. I was really impressed by him defensively when I watched them. He's quick. He's really quick.
Yeah.
I was surprised he was the bench guy, but then it said it was a freshman, and I was like, oh, he just hadn't played much yet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, both of the freshmen looked good for Auburn on against Vermont, but can you compare that, a home opener against Vermont, to playing in the Toyota Center against the number 1 team in college basketball, according to KenPom? I can't wait to see how the freshmen step up. And even a lot of these new guys, like Pegues coming from Furman, he didn't get this opportunity. Miles Kelly from Georgia Tech, he got to play against some, really good ACC teams while he was there. But this is a totally different thing. You've got a number next to your name too. What does that look like? I mean, this is a much larger stage than what a lot of these guys have played on. And you just never know fully how people are going to play and respond when they're in that situation for the first time.
It's a big stage, and frankly, like we said, it's 8:30 p.m. local time, I believe. It's the biggest game on TV that night.
That's almost later than you made me record this.
Almost. The other thing I was going to say is that both schools are off of football this week, and I weirdly think that plays into fans and paying attention. And I mean, we play Arizona next week. That's a fun football game for us.
Sure.
I think this is all eyes on the basketball programs this weekend, though. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and both of our football programs, I don't know what Houston's expectations were in football going into it, but Auburn certainly are higher than what has happened. And I think like them wrecking Vermont, like the Auburn fan base needed that, Parker. Like they needed that. And I think you're going to see some folks that would typically travel for a football game. They may travel to Houston to watch this game. I think that's certainly a factor.
There are plenty of things to go see and do in Houston, frankly, if you wanted to kill time on Saturday and Sunday. Like, it's a big city, and it has that kind of a draw in a way.
What's your favorite thing to do at Houston?
In the city of Houston? Oh, see, I'm an eater. I'm a food person.
What's the best restaurant in the city of Houston?
Oh, you got to go to Ninfa's. I don't know if it's the highest. It's like the classic original Ninfa's. Houston fajita. Ninfa, Ninfa. That'd be my rec to a lot of people. But get some Tex-Mex, get some fajitas, get a couple margaritas, and go enjoy a basketball game. What else could you do, right? That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm sold. Who wins this game and how do they do it? That's coming up on this crossover edition of Locked On Auburn and Locked On Coogs. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%.
Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society.
Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account.
Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of high net worth for any net worth.
These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month.
The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold.
Sign up at robinhoodgold.com/gold.
Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold.
Investing involves risk.
Rate may change.
Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Sadly, the lines for this game are not out yet as we record this Thursday night, almost at midnight. But we are recording this before the lines drop over at FanDuel. But you've got over to the side there, Auburn's odds to win the title plus 2,000. Houston's odds to win the title plus 1,100. This is the national championship.
The national championship. And I put those there, Zach. I want those there because this is kind of the time to hit that number because the winner of this game's odds will change dramatically.
Yeah, it's right. Like,
get on that now.
Yep. There you go. That is betting advice from Parker Ainsworth. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's over at FanDuel.com. Final few moments on this crossover edition of Locked On Auburn, Locked On Coogs. Who wins this game? Parker Ainsworth.
So I'm going to say Houston, and obviously part of that's because I have a Houston shirt on, a Houston hat on, and that's the people I get to watch and cheer on every day. But the other thing I'll say too is that I think I mentioned it, having played together, having played under Sampson, understanding these situations, playing in the Toyota Center, I think this is the kind of game where the teams are so close in a lot of areas that those margin things become a big deal. I'm sure you feel a little bit differently about it, but that's where I think this game changes.
No, I think Houston wins a close game. I think these teams are really similar, but how often does Houston play in the Toyota Center?
In the last few years when they've been good, it's been about once a year, if I'm being honest. It's not. It's usually a big non-conference game. Last year it was Texas A&M around this time. It was an early December game, actually, if I remember correctly.
Did they win that game?
They did win that game. And it was the same kind of thing where it was a very good A&M team. Wade Taylor went for 36 and Houston stuck it out at the end. You could see something like that happen this one. Johni Broome has a big game.
Totally.
He gets it, and all those, but it just something clicks for Houston playing close to home with guys that have played together for a long time.
Yeah. You're too confident. I'm
too confident. Well, I was going to say, what's Bruce Pearl's? I mean, he's done this for a long time at a high level. What is his, because you said he's good at this part, his speech to his guys? Like, how does he get guys into the, ready for battle in this instance?
Yeah, and I think naturally, the type of culture he creates is everybody's doubting you all the time, and these guys really buy into it. But there are a lot of new faces. How quick does that take? with all of these new faces, with these freshmen and these incoming transfers. It also usually takes Auburn a little while to figure out how to play away from Neville Arena. It usually takes them a hot minute to actually be able to score effectively. But there's something about this team, or at least early on, Parker, where this team seems to have a little bit of an it factor. I know it's so early and it almost feels ridiculous to say, but what we saw on Wednesday night in the opener was extremely impressive. The most impressive two halves of Auburn basketball I've seen in a minute. Small sample size, but certainly worth getting excited about. It's easy to see certain things that translate, or certain things that you see that could translate to the big stage Saturday night.
Who's your X factor? Because in watching that game, I guess I have my thoughts, but you know a lot more about him.
I would say Cheney Johnson is the X factor. Is that who you were going to say?
I'd say a big guy. If he just has one of those games where he grabs every board, couple good bounces and a couple hustle plays, those plays are a big momentum thing. And I kind of think inversely, the other thing is for Houston is to keep Cheney and then to also keep Johni Broome obviously off the boards, to kind of keep them out of rhythm in that way. I think that's a big deal for Houston.
Which team do you think is better defensively in this matchup?
I think Houston's better defensively, and I know that I'm going to sound pompous, and I think Houston's the best defensive team in the country. I really do. They're year in, year out. Say it with your
chest, brother. Say it with your chest. Let's go.
Best defensive team in the country. No, I think year in, year out, Sampson does this thing. I don't know who will be his guy in the running for Big 12 Conference Player of the Year and Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, but he had both last year with Jamal. He just a different guy. Seems to be that kind of guy every year.
Who could be that guy?
Right now, I'm thinking it's going to be Juwan Roberts, our power forward, which is a fun matchup with Johni Broome. I could also see it being in the guards area with Emmanuel Sharp. He's a junior. He's started last year as a sophomore, played a lot as a freshman. He's kind of a getting thrown into a leadership role this year, and he's in the best shape of his life. He's lost some weight, looks really good. I could see that all translating as well.
Very handsome,
long braids. A lot of tattoos, long braids, but some people like that, Zach.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's great. Parker, for all the Auburn folks watching, how can they check out everything you've got going on?
Locked On Coogs Today podcast, just like Locked On Auburn. We do a show every day. And then obviously on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, I'm at Pains. I guess it's not called Twitter anymore, but I'm at Painsworth 512, P as in Parker, Ainsworth as in AINSWRTH 512. Zach, I have a feeling people are going to like to clap at you after this game.
Sweet.
Where can they find you to do that at?
Yeah, Locked On Auburn, same way you're consuming Locked On Coogs, you can find Locked On Auburn, whether it's on audio or YouTube. And hey, we'll be live right after the game. So if y'all want to come talk smack or congratulate us, head over to Locked On Auburn's YouTube page. We'll be live right after the game. So until then, this has been a crossover between Locked On Auburn and Locked On Coogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.